Have you ever wanted to learn a foreign language but have never taken those first steps to get started? Maybe you wanted to go traveling but thought yourself incapable. By sharing my story of how I learned my first ever foreign language, I hope to encourage you to get out there and start your own journey.
Learn what?
Hi, and welcome to Learn What, a channel all about the lived experiences of learning something new. Whether a hobby, skill, or life lesson, I wish to expand upon these things in order to encourage you to get out there and live life to the fullest. My language learning journey started just as I finished university. I was still working in a hardware store part-time, and I quite passively decided not to continue searching for career options. At that time, all I wanted to do was train and kind of just enjoy life. I was living on the coast for the first time, living 5 minutes from the beach, so I loved surfing, training, and at that time, that's when I started learning German. My wish to learn German seemingly came out of nowhere. I met a couple of friends, one from Germany, one from Switzerland, who I knew from my training group, and one day we went hiking together, and I overheard them speaking German to each other. Something clicked in my mind. I was totally fascinated with it. I don't know why, it's a bit of a mystical thing. Why then and there that suddenly clicked my mind into Schnellgang. All I wanted to do was learn German. I was fixated on it. My brain was still ticking over. I was thinking, these guys are living in Australia. They're using English, living through the language. That is what I want to do. And so I got on board straight away. I didn't really have any drive to go search for career options. All I wanted to do was learn and eventually go to Germany to live there. It's quite interesting because, well, I never really wanted to jump into a language or jump into an activity like I did learning German. In school, I learned a bit of Spanish, but I never really felt close enough to use the language. It felt so far away. Many of us in school, we kind of take it just for granted with the learning opportunities we get. So this was the first time where I consciously made a choice, and in some mystical way, German chose me. Soon after this epiphany, all I wanted to do was find a German teacher. I needed to get the basics down. So after a bit of searching, I put an ad on a popular website called Gumtree at the time to put myself out there saying Ben is looking for a teacher. A few weeks later, I was contacted by a teacher and I began lessons with her. Now, I definitely took the slow and steady approach. I only committed to 1.5 hours per week. That included homework, but also some private study as well. I did this for around 4 to 5 months, but I didn't really think it'd be enough to survive Germany. My teacher, at the end of the day, just said, good luck, viel Spaß, in the way you go, you should be fine. Definitely the hardest thing, though, about the whole trip, about going through with it, was booking the plane ticket. Now, one of the hardest things about this journey was booking a plane ticket. As soon as I got that plane ticket booked, it was game on. It was getting real. I was preparing myself to leave Australia. I, in the back of my mind, did not have the intention to come back. I wanted to stay long term. I didn't really tell too many people that, but that was my intention. This decision, compared to every other decision, like I mentioned before, it was the most drastic I've ever made. A decision where I really felt driven and compelled to reach a goal. So on May 15th, 2015, I departed Australia, Brisbane to be exact, and landed in London. Then I stayed with my brother for a couple of weeks, but then I took off and travelled through Europe. I would say half of that time was spent in German-speaking countries, so Switzerland and Germany. The other half, or 1/3, I would say, in other countries such as France. Being in Germany was an awesome experience the first time that I got there. It was so exhilarating. I finally got there, and I finally was able to speak a little bit, or at least try. I did try to speak German, but I got discouraged very easily, like most language learners would, especially if it's your first foreign language. You don't really know how to tackle these situations or what to expect. I remember trying to talk to the lady at the hostel or the campsite I was at, and I did not understand one word she said when she replied to me. So I kind of memorized the sentence I wanted to say, but didn't really understand when she replied to me. So this was a common theme that happened with me. And then I would try to switch to English because it just got too uncomfortable. And that was one thing that I really learned, was to be okay with feeling uncomfortable. In the end, I did try looking for a job in Berlin. I did some measly attempts finding work. I felt like I had to have an all or nothing approach. That meant I speak German or I don't speak at all. This was very detrimental to my progress because it did stop me from seeking opportunities, because a lot of people do speak English, and I could have very well sought and found an opportunity to stay in Berlin. As you may have it, I actually went back to London where my brother was living so I could earn some money again, save up and continue learning German. When I got to London, I found a job. I worked in a coffee shop. I had a fantasy to work in a coffee shop. I did a bit of a course in Australia. I remember doing this course, and I drank 3 or 4 coffees within 1 hour. I never drank coffee in my life. And I had to work an evening shift that evening, and I was totally wrecked. I was yawning so much that it felt like my jaw was just open the whole time. For me, I worked 50-hour weeks, but I got to save a little bit of money. In that time as well, I did visit the Goethe Institute. It is a language school. They have them all around the world that offer German language courses. These courses are quite premium. I opted to do a once a week course with a group, and it was a beginner's course. So a lot of stuff I did know already, but it was very helpful just to be around language learners and to be exposed to the language again, especially in an English-speaking country. So there were a few ways which I tried learning German. So like I mentioned before, I took a course at the Goethe Institute just to get more exposure and also just to learn something new. But I also tried reaching out to other German native speakers. So one thing that I learned that I could do was a language exchange, which means if there was a German out there looking to improve their English, then we could speak English for 1 hour. I could help correct, improve, that sort of thing. But for the next hour, we would then talk German, and they could do the same for me. Super cool concept. Now, another way I tried learning was listening to music. I remember vividly when I arrived, catching the bus, listening to 99 Luftballons from Nina and Crow. Crow was also a very popular kind of hip-hop rap artist from Germany. After residing in London for about a year, I decided enough was enough. I needed to move on and continue my language learning journey. There was a lot of places I visited as well during those first 3 months of traveling, but Hamburg, the city in the north, the port city, I'd never been to, and I was fascinated by it. And just doing a bit of research on Google was enough to go, look, I'm going to go to Hamburg. I'm going to try my luck there. So in the first month that I was going to stay there, I booked a language course, just to get into the flow of things, learn some basics again. So it was a basic course, but the whole idea was also to gain social connection. During that time as well, I had contacts in a local church, a pretty hip, cool church in a part of town where they have a lot of bars and cafes and music venues. So I actually had contacts from London who knew people in this church. So I went there the first ever day I arrived. I was able to connect in that church. Very cool church. Every week I went, most weeks, and slowly I learned and understood a bit more and more. At the start it was very difficult. I barely understood anything they said. I would learn bits and pieces as I went and ask them what were they talking about at the end. Now after about the first month, I decided, no, I'm going to take a break from classes. I'm just going to do language exchanges. So all I wanted to do was meet up with people and talk. And this worked out really good. I was able to, through Facebook groups, contact a few people, and I was able to meet up nearly every day during that second month I stayed in Hamburg. 3 months later, so 3 months into my stay in Hamburg, I got a job working in a coffee shop. I could just speak enough, so I was confident with customers. Obviously at the start it was very difficult understanding, but for a couple of weeks it was okay. I had my own little dictionary book. Everyone helped me learn a bit, which was now by, if we fast forward a little bit, so what I was doing, I was living as well with some Germans, speaking German, fantastic. I went to a German-speaking church and I worked in a workplace that just spoke German. So this is the ideal situation for a language learner who wants to immerse themselves in the language. I did have friends who did speak a little bit of English now and then, so that was no big deal. In the end, I got a bit more relaxed about it all. I wasn't so strict. If we fast forward 6 months, I was able to understand most things. Obviously, idioms and that sort of thing were also very difficult still, but I was progressing in that case as well. I was still meeting up with some of my language partners, and I was still actively learning. By about the year mark, I was in a different role. I ended up working in a kindergarten, speaking English to kindergarten kids, and that was a bit different. I was slowly kind of moving away from the coffee shop and losing that interest in pure learning German. I wanted to expand as well on my skills. So that's something also to keep in mind if you're learning or want to learn, is that your goals may change, and that's okay. I still speak a little bit now with friends, especially over Skype or FaceTime, but I really have that desire to improve. So one day I will pick up the reins again and hopefully get my C1 certificate. So all in all, I did live in Germany for around 2.5 years. I did reach my goal, very generalized goal that was, to learn the language and experience life through that language. Now I'm back in Australia, also after a few more years living elsewhere, and at the moment I'm learning Spanish. So I hope to inform you guys all about how that's going. Guys, this brings me to the end of the video about my German language journey. Of course, that language journey is never over. There's obviously more I could have said about that, what I learned along the way, what strategies I used to learn German, and I'll say that for future videos. If you did feel encouraged or helped in any way in the video, drop a like, comment, or feel free to subscribe. That'll be much appreciated. Until next time, thank you very much.
Learn what?